To our first elective for the afternoon. Hopefully we'll have a few more friends join us, but I want to start on time for us here in the room as well as those online. So we're here for the elective Reading and Teaching the Old Testament Throughout the Years, a personal reflection by Helen Jensen. So thank you for choosing this elective, whether you're here in person or online. I think you've made a great choice, although it's very hard to choose with the electives today. I found it very hard. My name's Tara Stenhouse. I serve on the faculty here at Moore College, teaching in the ministry department as well as serving as the Dean of Women. I can't remember when I met you, Helen, but it was sometime in the 1990s, so a little while ago, through the Ministry of Campus Bible Study and St. Matthias. Two distinct memories of Helen. First is sitting in Helen's lounge room with a bunch of female ministry apprentices drinking tea from her beautiful china. Helen hosted our women's training program. It was a great morning that we had. I can't remember, Wednesday mornings, I think it was. Wednesday. Yeah. Second memory is sitting under the leadership of Helen as she oversaw the women's Bible study ministry at St. Matthias. Thursday mornings was what it was, and it was TAT, Thursdays at 10, and especially her writing and encouraging us to write Old Testament Bible studies for our groups. So that was a great encouragement. So I can't wait to hear a bit more from what Helen has to teach us today about reading and teaching the Old Testament, especially after this morning. I hope our appetite's kind of been whet about how great it is to get into Genesis and the Old Testament, but also just how unfamiliar it is. So it'll be great to be encouraged by Helen and better equipped to be reading the Old Testament for ourselves, but also teaching it to others. Helen's going to speak for about an hour, or, Helen will speak for however long she wants, but we'll have a few moments for questions towards the end. We'll finish at 3 p.m. We're using the Slido app for our questions, which you can in the room, but you'll get the opportunity in the room to ask your question face to face. But the code to use for Slido is B129. B129. You're welcome to submit your questions online on Slido at any point in time, but I won't read them out until it's our official question time. We're going to pray now and commit our time together to God. Our loving Father in heaven, thank you for the gift of the Old Testament and that all of your promises are found yes in our Lord Jesus. We ask that you'll be with Helen today as she encourages us to read and teach the Old Testament faithfully. May we grow in our love of your word in the Old Testament and be better equipped to read and teach it at home and in the various churches and communities we find ourselves in. Father, we pray these things in Jesus' precious name. Amen. As I hand over to Helen, I've got just a few questions. Nice. First is, tell us how you came to Christ. Come and stand over here too.
I had been taught and grown up through Sunday school, and a dear friend of my mother's who always made sure when we went and stayed there that I went to church with her in the mornings, for which I thank God very much. And when I was a teenager, a long, long time ago, Billy Graham came and spoke, and the country town I lived in, because it was a mining town, was full of people who were from a Methodist background, lots of Methodist churches, and they arranged for a whole lot of people to be able to go to a venue and to sit outside and hear Billy Graham's message. And I really came to understand the faith, I think, through his speaking and teaching.
That's wonderful. I'll just move over so we can make sure we get the question for those people online. Second question is, tell us a bit about your family and how that's grown over the years.
I'm married to Philip, and we had 3 children. We still have them, and they have married and produced 13 grandchildren.
Yes, so
mostly boys. Don't know what that means. I had a boy and 2 girls.
I'm going to hand over to you, Helen. Thank you so much for your preparation for us today as well.
Okay. Thank you for coming to this group. I didn't really expect anyone much to want to come to this, but there you go. Wasn't this morning terrific? Did it leave you with lots of questions that you wanted to go back and find out more about? The situation, the overall scope that they looked at was terrific, but there are other questions you probably had. I had a few other questions, and I thought to myself, I have never thought in Genesis 18 that Sarah lied to God. Why has that never occurred to me when I've read that passage again and again? I never noticed that she lied to God. I know she laughed and she tried to cover up, and I thought, no, she lied to God, just as Gary told us. It's very worthwhile to keep going. If you want to interrupt, don't mind. Don't do it if you want to. I was going to say the first major question I wanted to ask was, why study the Old Testament? I was recently at a gathering of younger clergy, and I was introduced by one of the clergymen to another clergyman who lived in the area, whose name I've heard and whose children are friends with my grandchildren, and I'd never met. And that was very kind of him to introduce me. And then he said, I said, we're old friends. We've actually known each other for a long, long time, since he was a university student. And he said, I was in second year at uni, and I was not a very old Christian, not very old in the faith. And I was given this fellow to read the Bible with. And we were reading along, and he said to me, do you know what that means? And I said, no. And he said, it's from the Old Testament. Let's have a look at where it's from. And he said from then on, the person I was reading the Bible with was reading the Bible with me. And because I knew who was involved, I was really quite tickled by that. And I thought of this talk. I can't understand how you can read the New Testament without looking at some of the Old Testament background. I thought, what would you do if you started off reading a gospel with somebody, which is what I've done, mostly from Mark's gospel. I think the first thing you do, you get struck by that quote, don't you, which part is from Isaiah and part from Malachi, and you think, And then I thought, well, okay, if we don't start with Mark, what about Matthew? The genealogy's there. And you can imagine someone who's a new Christian, like I took a group of people who were just interested in finding out about Christianity, reading Mark's gospel. I thought, what if I'd have taken them to Mark? They would have said, who's David? Who's Abraham? Why is this here? And I thought, okay, well, let's look at Luke. I'm beginning to read through Luke, philosophers, can't say it. Anyway, I'm writing this to tell you these account of these things. And Philip said to me, the ESV has that mistranslated. And I said, does it? And he said, the word is actually fulfilled. And if something's fulfilled, you've got to look at where it came from before. And I thought, well, that does out Luke. And then I thought, what about John? Oh, in the beginning was the Word. Okay, we're going to do a bit of a Genesis account here of creation. Maybe I'll go back to Mark's Gospel. And I can skip over bits with new people that you couldn't do with people who really know a lot about Christianity, because they'll say, where does that come from? What does it have to do with it? Why is it included here? So I don't really understand how you can read the New Testament with people without having read some Old Testament to give the background. When we read, I've been reading John's Gospel recently, and I thought, how could anybody understand some of the interchange between Jesus and the Pharisees in John 8 about we are the children of Abraham, we've never been slaves to anybody, etc., if you have not a clue what being children to Abraham is meant to mean? Well, I think we read the Old Testament also where we see how the character of God, those beautiful passages when Moses asks God to show himself and he talks about his character, slow to anger, compassionate. And I thought when we're reading the New Testament, we understand about Abraham because we see God keeps his promises. Sometimes the promises are a long time coming. Imagine him saying to Abraham, your people are going to be taken into another land for 400 years till the sin of these people is built up, and then you're going to come back. 400 years. There is no way he would have seen that happen. But God kept his promise, and God kept keeping his promises. Through looking at Judges, you know, it was a people that grew up after the time of Joseph who didn't know Joseph, and after that generation, Joshua, and after that generation, they turned away, didn't they? And every time it keeps recurring, and they cry out to God eventually, and God sends a helper to rescue them, a rescuer, a saviour. I mean, God keeps his promises. And if we read the Old Testament, we see that again and again. And I also thought, and especially this is underlined from this morning, we understand more about the world we live in from reading Genesis. Wasn't that clear this morning? About sin, about creation, about judgment, about the fall and the effects it's had continuing in the lives of people up to today. If you turn on the news, you know that, don't you? There was a shooting somewhere. There are 15-year-old girls raped somewhere else, and they're eventually charging all the people. What was that? That was in this morning. There was a shooting this morning. Apparently last night in our area, someone was arrested for domestic violence. It's all right. I sleep well. I slept right through the sirens and everything, and it wasn't in my building, so. But every time you turn on the news, you see the fallen world we live in. Okay? And Genesis, and indeed the whole of the scriptures, especially Genesis, helps us understand about the fallen world we live in. Wasn't it interesting this morning when they mentioned domestic violence right back in chapter 4, where Lamech was boasting to his wives, not to his sons, to his wives. Now, that's also another thing I noticed his boasting before and how awful it was, but I'd never thought it was to his wives. Why? A nasty person he was. Anyway, there we go. Why do we study the Old Testament within a Bible study group is the second heading. And I tried to work out 4 reasons why we would do that. Apart from the fact that we don't understand our New Testament unless we read our Old Testament. I thought in Bible studies, you can actually cover a wider scene of background and then immediately the immediate scene in front of you, and you can cover things that aren't covered in a sermon. Apart from the interaction within the group, which I'll talk about later, you can actually cover material in a way which is different and in a way which includes things that you won't necessarily heard covered in a sermon or a talk. You can include extras, like family trees. Now, that's interesting. Fancy drawing a family tree of Joseph from Genesis and thinking, okay, Sarah and Abraham, and that leads to Isaac and Rebecca, and that leads to Jacob. Oh, and then we get a bit of a problem with all these 4 women who produced children to him, and this one is the one who's the mother. Now, sometimes that's helpful to people who have very limited background, as they see how that fits together. You can include maps. I thought this was hilarious. Where is it? I've got some Matthias Media stuff which I want to commend to you later. Look at this. I have included in their thing maps because I wasn't satisfied. There you go. There are many brilliant map books around. I didn't bring several of them that I use because some of them are too big and too heavy. But there are some brilliant maps books around, and they explain where places were and how they're related to each other and why. You had to go here, or they had to go here when they came out of the Promised Land to go there. And one I picked up as I was leaving. I'm a geographer, by the way, so I don't mind drawing maps or drawing diagrams or anything like that. Here is Mount Nebo. Where is the promised land? Moses stood there and looked over the Rift Valley of the Jordan and could see the promised land. And you can say it, but when you see it, it makes so much more sense, doesn't it? Sorry about those people out there. I don't know why I picked that up, except it just, when I was searching for something else, it fell into my hands. Family trees, maps, diagrams. Here's an interesting exercise, which I'm going to get you to do later. We were writing, my Bible study group leaders and I, because we went in small groups within a bigger group, and we wrote a lot of the studies ourselves. We were writing some studies on Joshua, and one of the ladies said, no, sorry, I will give you Joshua later. We were writing a series of studies on Numbers, and one of the ladies said in her study, draw a picture. I thought, well, that's okay. I believe in maps and diagrams, family trees. Draw a picture of this. So I dutifully sat down and drew the picture. And I discovered all sorts of things from doing that. And I remembered that people learn differently. Some people learn through pictures. Some people, like me, learn through maps and diagrams and family trees. But I'd never written a study and said to anybody, draw a picture of this. And I'll give that to you to do later on as a study. Somebody also, I think it was the same woman, in a series we wrote on Joshua, said, draw a picture of the Battle of Jericho. I thought to myself, I don't know how the people in my group are going to cope with this question in the series of a whole other questions. When I thought about it, I thought you can do an interesting progression of the days and what happened between the first one and the last one that you can read, but if you learn through a visual way, you can actually see the difference. So I was very dutiful and did what she asked me to do. Some of my group had brilliant pictures, but that's another story. Mine was more like stick figures. Okay. In a group, you can gain insights, perspectives, the thrill of seeing others see the relevance of the passage and how it applies in the New Testament. In teaching, that's called the aha experience, and we want everyone to have it because then they'll be hooked on learning forever. But in a group, you can see that happen too. And you can almost see the wheels of someone's brain working and saying, does that mean that? And it's thrilling, especially if you can say yes. And you can say, not quite. Perhaps it could mean other things. But that's another story about how to in-group dynamics. But it is thrilling to do studies with women. In the course of studying Malachi, in one of the other groups, a lady became a Christian. I'm thinking, Malachi. Anyway, God works through the studies to reveal himself to people. And if the studies aren't very well written and you think, oh, I wish I'd had my friend who does the reviewing of the studies to review that one and maybe change a few things, you can see people have come to an understanding of things they hadn't seen before and are very thrilled that they've now learnt something that they didn't see before. Because you can tailor your Old Testament in a series of Bible study groups, and over the year, you can, we'll do one term of this and one term of that, a term on the gospel, a term from the Old Testament, a term from the epistles, a term for expanding Christian experience and learning of something different, like how to present the gospel. Because you can do that, you can tailor in the year what you study in the Old Testament to what you study in the New Testament. And here I should stop talking and ask you, can you think of anything that you would study in the New Testament as a result of studying Genesis? Okay, part of John's Gospel. What else? More direct than that. Yes. How on earth are you going to explain to anybody chapter 4 of Romans and what the real point of it is, and 9 to 11? Or, if you're going to study Romans, what's the New Testament, smaller New Testament book that's similar? Galatians and some parts of Hebrews as well. But if you do a term, you work out your year plan, you can work out some of the things that would be helpful to study in the Old Testament when you know what you want to study in the New Testament. Can you think of any other examples not out of Genesis? Try Leviticus. Yes. They don't women don't sit there and look at you and say, what? What does that mean? What's that got to do with? We studied that, and now I understand how it fits together. How can you talk about the Passover and the significance of the death of Jesus at Passover time if you don't have a clue from Exodus what the Passover was all about? Anyway, that's a matter of planning. But you can do that in Bible study groups when you've done your year's program. And someone can come and say, as my leaders were quite unafraid to say to me, I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think that's a good idea, Helen. Let's not do that one. I've got a group that's made up of new Christians, and that is not going to help them. And sometimes you might say, you just study all the way through, you just read all the way through Mark's Gospel with them and leave the Old Testament study while everyone else is studying something else. And sometimes you say to them, no, we are all going to look at Numbers. And the leaders look at you and say, are you sure? I say that because I actually did make the groups look at Numbers several times. Every time I read, I find more stuff. Anyhow, if you wanted a third heading, I would say, what sort of studies should you use to study the Old Testament? Now, we've got a why, and we've got a bit of a how, or we've got a why and we've got another reason why in small groups. This is a bit of a how. These are all the only ones I could find in my bookshelf amongst children's books and books of interest were these by Matthias Media. And if you look at them, they have my writing inside because they're actually the ones I have. They run some wonderful pre-prepared studies, which you could do weekly. It's a good thing if you can get the women to prepare before they come, because they've thought about what they're reading and they have their questions prepared about what they've read and what they didn't understand. But these aren't the only ones. These are available in the bookshop on 19 King Street today if you want to go and buy some. There's a whole variety of subjects and topics. See, that one's a topic, not a book of the Bible. Personal follow-up, we were trying to train the ladies in how they could do personal follow-up with people. The others, I think, are all books of the Bible. Yep. But there's some ideas, but they're not the only ones available. And they've really thought about the questions they want to ask you, even if they haven't included any family trees or maps or diagrams. That's pre-prepared studies to do weekly. I know there's a group that you're not allowed to say anything if you haven't prepared the study, but I never believed in that. Everybody should have an equal say even if they haven't prepared. But it was very helpful in one of my groups when a lady had triplets, and they were small, and she was always prepared. And it made the others who thought they were too busy to get round to preparing the Bible study to prepare. That year, everybody was prepared. After the first week, when it was noticed that she was prepared and she had triplets. You may even know. The person I'm talking about may even know, because it's the only person I've ever had in a group that had triplets. Right. You might want to add to the studies by doing some of the extra things. On the day, say, look up this and see how this fits together. This is a map and this is how this fits together. You can do, as we did a lot of, the leaders writing the studies, with somebody who's very cluey, very knowledgeable, very Christian, checking them and putting them together. And saying, do you know that in one of the groups, one of the women who prepared, the other woman came and said, she's written something that's anti-Semitic, Helen. And I said, I think we'll have to change that. And we said, do you realise? She had no idea. But the woman who was compiling them had picked it up. If you've got very clever women working with you, that's terrific. The leaders are terrific. They can do terrific things. And you don't have to do it all yourself. It's great. And sometimes you're not particularly happy, but mostly if this lady did the compiling of them and she read through them all and she put them out in beautiful form and all that sort of stuff, which I'm completely hopeless at, she picked up any things like that, which was terrifically helpful. Then you can do and prepare daily studies. If you look at some of the Matthias Media stuff, they have produced daily studies over a period of time. So I think Tony Payne did the first set in Genesis, then somebody else did it, and I think Andrew Reid did the third set. And I used those and wrote a set of my own of daily Bible studies that the women studied during the week, answered the questions, and then on the day we met together, they shared what excitement they'd found, what they'd learned, and what they didn't understand, and what their questions were. And it was really, really very helpful. I also wrote a series on Genesis, Exodus, and Numbers. In the Numbers group, my leaders were I was in a different church. The leaders were, numbers. Anyhow, and I had a group that I had been reading Mark's Gospel with the previous year. And one of them was a much older lady. And I thought, I don't think she's going to last through Numbers. Anyway, last year, someone who's still reading the Bible with her said to me, you'll never guess what happened, Helen. I said something and she said, oh yes, that's in Numbers. And then she told them that I'd made the group do daily Bible readings through Numbers. So you never know. But look, at some books are not open to that sort of format easily. Use the ones that are around, look through all the material, but remember some books are not as easily done in that format. I mean, I just think anybody who tries to write studies like that through Isaiah or Jeremiah deserves some sort of medal, especially if they're good. But you bear that in mind and you work out not only how is the year going to fit together and what we're studying together, what format should we have for each type of term, which books are too hard to do that way, or will we never have the people with enough time to do the preparation and there are none we can go out and get, and then go and get some that are already prepared for a weekly format. Okay, what should you do during the studies? This is about a bit about how to lead. And this applies to New Testament as well as Old Testament studies. Now, what we did was we met in a group so you could see everyone's face. Somebody said to me, if we sit on your left-hand side, you don't ask me any questions. So after that, I made sure I asked questions, right? Very dangerous thing to say. We could see the reactions, we could see the faces of each of the people. And that helped them be willing to share about what they had learned and how they had applied it. Because all of your studies must have relevance by looking at some parts of the New Testament and a relevance to what they've learnt from it, whether it's changed behaviour or it's a great praise of God for him keeping his promises or a whole lot of other things. Sometimes some of the prepared studies from other people that I've used, I've not been particularly happy with the applications. And sometimes because I've led women's studies amongst women, they have a different reaction to a man. I was thinking this morning how vulnerable women are. They were in Genesis and they still are, aren't they? I'm thinking particularly about widows. When my grandmother was widowed with 2 teenage girls, there was no widow's pension. It came later. And do you know what? There's no widow's pension again anymore because every woman is supposed to be able to go out and work after the youngest child turns 8. My grandmother went through great hardship. And some people who are widows of young children do still. And I suppose in a sense we ought to apply that to unmarried mums. The poorest group in our communities are unmarried mums and Aborigines. It's got to tell us something about our system of caring for people. Okay, we're in a group, you see, and I've got co-leaders because they can't rely upon me to be very empathetic. I didn't do social work. I don't do social work. I'm not quite tut-tut there, you know, when your life's falling apart, but just a bit above that, right? Now, they know that about me, and I choose leaders or people volunteer to lead with me who are very good at that sort of thing, which helps. So you get into a group and a woman breaks down and starts crying. I'm thinking, okay, this is a time of prayer. Is there anything we can pray for you? See, I learned that after about 4 years. Is there anything we can pray for you? To the woman bursting out in tears. And she says, I've just found out I was abused as a child. Now, I'm not a social work person. And my co-leader is very empathetic, but she's not a social work person either. I think she was a chemical engineer or something. Have we got anyone else in the group who's really good at this sort of stuff? You know, thinking as you look around at the faces. And in the end, we let her talk to us about how she found out and how she was coping with it. And I said, we'll pray now, and then we'll do our study. And my co-leader was so angry with me. We should have spent the whole time going through and understanding what her problem was and helping her. And I said, we are not trained to do that. She needs to go to a professional counsellor to work this through. We cannot do it in our group. The other women who've come want to do Bible study. Well, she went to one of the other group leaders who is still a social worker. And she said to her, Helen did the right thing. You won't be able to solve the problem. What we did with that lady who eventually would only come to us and wouldn't go to church anywhere, and it was a mess. We made sure she had food in her cupboards to feed her children. we made sure that after the counselling session, somebody took her home because she was such a mess she couldn't get home. We prayed with her, we prayed for her. And she came through that. It was a horrific experience because the group knew every week what was happening. She's now leading a Bible study in another church, and I'm told that she is the most fierce Bible study leader there ever is. And I think I'd be terrified to go to her group. But it took 2 or 3 years for her to be able to just be a member of the group, and it took some time before she was able to go back to church where there were men. You could only do that in a women's group. And we did see exciting things happen. It wasn't my group, the lady was converted when they were studying Malachi. There were some people converted when we read Mark's Gospel, though, so I always look back on that and say, something happened. You've got to be careful in your group to allow discussion, but to keep the ladies on track. I belong to a Bible study group now where I don't lead, and I virtually only say anything when they ask me a question, except if some of the older people are going off on track. And then I try to be very gentle and say something about where we are in the study. Because one woman said to me, I'd hate to be in a group, lead a Bible study group with you in it. And I thought, I don't think I'm fearsome. And obviously the lady who leads our group doesn't think I'm fearsome. But I decided I wouldn't say anything unless I was specifically asked. And sometimes she couldn't get the answer out of people and she asked me. So life has a whole lot of things that you do in it, from leading youth group, teaching Sunday school, leading youth group, leading women's groups, to being a member and being helpful. One of the other things in a Bible study group is to see, when you're doing the studies, if some woman has a problem with a particular part of the scriptures or a particular doctrine that comes from what you're studying. But God wouldn't do that, they say. Well, we just read that he did. Well, I don't think I like a God like that. Do you like a God who's forgiving and generous and compassionate and loving? Same God. Okay, that gives you opportunity to go over the gospel and to reassure people and to point out things that are there but they hadn't noticed. You might also, in a group, encourage the people to prepare studies themselves, to help each other in preparation. And of course, you look out for future leaders. You're always looking to grow and people are always moving. So suddenly you turn up, work it out a few weeks before you turn up, and somebody says, well, they've left. You're down a leader. What are you going to do about it? But I've got co-leaders who've been with me or with some other leaders, and they say, this lady would make a terrific leader. Why don't we put so-and-so with her in the group and they can lead together? And that's very helpful because people move around these days so much, don't they? You know, one of the ladies who was due to write a study, the study didn't come in. And I said to our lady who coordinated it all, where is she? And they said, she's gone to the car races at Coolangatta. I said, what? Oh, I would never think of going to car races at all. So I said, what are we going to do? Have you got a study to fill in? Do you want me to write one? What are we going to do about it? So we covered that. You can't, they've gone on holidays. They got a cheap fare to go to England and visit their parents. You've got to make up what there is there. But sometimes that's unexpected. Certainly I didn't expect them to go to Coolangatta. And you're not really left in the lurch because you've got so many people who can help and do things. Look out for future leaders. Look out for people whose knowledge and expression means that they can be future writers of studies. I haven't written a proper study since I left the cathedral. I read the Bible with a lady and I write questions to go through with her, but it's not like a proper study. And it's tailored to her personality and the situation in which she finds herself, which is difficult. So it's not like writing a study that's going to include everybody, include all sorts of things. Okay, now here's your exercise. Look up Numbers. Okay, you think you've solved that? Read chapter 3. Okay, what did you notice especially? What did you notice especially?
In chapter 2, you see all the tribes are camped around and Levi just seems to be in the midst. But then in chapter 3, they're right to the east of the tent of meeting. So perhaps sort of in front of other three to guard people.
Yes, who's at the entrance of the tent of meeting facing the east?
Moses and Aaron and their families.
Yes.
But the other Levites are around the other sides of the...
Yes, according to their tribes and what they're going to do. Okay, go back to 2 and tell me, can you do this quickly? Look at verse 9. And it tells you all those listed of the camp of Judah and their companies were 186,400. Now, if you go through the numbers, that was the biggest group that were protecting Moses and Aaron and their families at the entrance. Doesn't that make sense? Isn't that incredible? Why were the Levites camped around the tent of meeting to keep away the other tribes? The other tribes were further out. Why were the Levites immediately around the tent of meeting?
Verse 7 and 8 of chapter 3.
Yes, what does it say?
They shall keep guard over the whole congregation before the tent of meeting as they minister at the tabernacle. They shall guard all the furnishings of the tent of meeting and keep guard over the people of Israel as they minister at the tabernacle.
Yes, they were actually there.
And the outside congregation.
Did you want to say something else?
To keep guard, because if people came near, they'd be put to death.
Yes, it was to stop the non-Levite tribe from going in, and it was thus protecting the other people of Israel. Okay, now when she came up with I would have asked other questions, by the way, if it were me writing the study, like, which tribe was with the other tribe? Are there any special points in that? A few things like that. I would have looked at verse 47 of chapter 1 to the end and talked about the special place of the Levites and stuff like that. But that was actually a very helpful exercise to say how we could make something that looked grown. We have to read through this and all the names and numbers to make some sense of it and how it fitted together and why it was important. Okay? But that's just an example of something that somebody did, that you might be more innovative when you write studies and be able to see opportunities, like draw a diagram, put one lot on this side and one lot on that side, that they're opposites, and see how different they are, the fruit of the Spirit, etc., and see how different the two lots are, the non-fruit of the Spirit. There are things you can do in a Bible study that sometimes some preachers do by now using overheads, but a lot of years we never had overheads for people to use, did we? And now you can sometimes do things like that. And now you can sometimes in a sermon put out a map and show them where the people are actually, where the battle is. How far is it from Jerusalem to Babylon? What did involve the movement of the people in captivity involve? Why is 137? They asked us to sing songs of Jerusalem. How can we sing their songs in a foreign land? Does that make any sense? Oh, maybe. And maybe when you find out a bit about the background of the Babylonians, it makes more sense too, about what they did and who they were. But sometimes if that's said in a sermon, it's lost because you don't have it in front of you and people cannot ask questions. Okay, now you do another job. As we've had Genesis this morning, and particularly from 1 to 25, about Abraham from 12 on, I want you to write a study of 10 questions. You need to be able to explain something of what went before in this record, this account of the life of Abraham, and something about what it means at the end. And use some of the techniques, diagrams, maps, family trees, etc. Use some of those somewhere in the study. 10 questions. The first one has to be dead easy. All of those who've ever said exam papers know that. First question everybody has to be able to do. Dead easy. And the answer is not Jesus. We're not teaching Sunday school, right? And see if you can work your way through one section of the life of Abraham. It doesn't have to be like we did this morning. You might want to talk about chapter 12 where God gives him the promises and what they mean and where you'd find it referred to in the New Testament and why it's important. There must be a New Testament application and part in it and why it's important. You might want to look at the problems that Jacob had, or the character of, in the sense, no, we'll leave Jacob and Joseph out. I was going to say the character of Joseph is quite incredible. But look at something to do with Abraham. And you don't have to have the lessons that you learnt this morning in it. There are a whole lot of other things. He had a particular view that he wanted to talk to us about, between equal but different and just equal. We have other things we will want to do in a study.
What size passage are you suggesting? A chapter?
It can be a chapter, it can be small, it can be larger than that. Imagine you're writing one of a series of studies for a Bible study group. You can stop there. That's your own personal work and reflection, right? Can I tell you that when you prepare studies, you actually refine them as you go. You go back and read them and say, that question doesn't make any sense. They'd have to have too much knowledge beforehand to answer that question. What about the people in the group who are new to Christianity? Grade them as you go along. And you'd go back and reread them and perhaps reword some of them, perhaps cross some out, not have them at all. Perhaps say the New Testament passage I've got them to look at is too hard. There are better ones. Go for one of the better ones and change them on things like that. Okay? If you have any questions, Tara is interested in getting me to answer questions.
We've had none come through on Slido.
Good grief,
Make sure I
really?
speak into this. So far, no questions through Slido.
Oh,
so
good.
over to you, face to face. What questions do you have? Thank you, Helen. Anyway, I'll say a bit more of a thank you later. But yeah, what questions do you have, especially as Helen's kind of challenged us to think very practically and have a go ourselves? Yeah, what questions do you have?
Just, I suppose, a little bit more on the study questions. Like, would you, it's probably different for
Well, you do want to look at what some of the background is. So if you're writing one in a series on Abraham, you would know where your passage fits in the series and build on what has gone before. So you wouldn't have to worry about establishing background because it's already been done for you. And you wouldn't want to take any questions that are in the next passage because that's somebody else's study. So that would be ruled out by the coordinator. You can't ask that question. You might want to refer to a different passage in the New Testament, and that'd be quite valid because of what you're wanting to bring out of the study. And you would have a point about what you would want to bring out. We're not just looking at it like a comprehension. It actually has meaning as a comprehension does, but it has more meaning because it's the Word of God and it fits in a series. And you are using it not only to teach people the Old Testament, but to teach them how to read the New and to see the principles there. So you'd start off with something fairly easy. It would come from the passage, but it'd be dead, you look you in the eye and it's something that's dead simple that people can see. Then you would work your way through by working through the passage, not doing a higgledy-piggledy all over the place, but actually I would have done it by working through what's there, what happened next, what happened next, what happened next. How is this important? Why is this important? How does it relate to maybe something that happened 2 studies ago? Because you can't do ones ahead. It's not someone else's study. Is this, Abraham trying to pass Sarah off as his sister twice. Has this happened before? That sort of thing. Where did it happen before? If so, where? You don't tell them it did. If so, where? And there might be some discussion about that. And again, the meaning of what that was all about. Why was he so afraid? Because he was afraid for his life. And he didn't, in that sense, at that time, he didn't trust God. If you were doing a feminist reading, of course you'd say, how did Sarah feel about it? We're not really told, are we? That answered the question, or you want some more?
Yeah, no, it was just helpful to hear you talk through.
Yeah.
A little bit more.
Another question from the room.
You mentioned that group, that lady with triplets, there was an expectation to prepare. What sort of preparation did you?
Well, we gave the studies
Actually,
out.
I might just repeat the question. Sorry, I forgot that earlier. Just the question about preparation and encouraging people in the group to prepare. What kind of level of preparation? How long would you expect? What kind of,
I think that's more than the question.
Okay.
We would give the studies out in a booklet. I was going to bring some and show you, but I could only find the ones with my notes all over. So, and you would know that we were working through. It would be numbered which week each study was for, and if you missed one, the 4th week. You'd had to prepare the 5th week for the study you were going to when you got there. It really helped because people then had real questions, not spur-of-the-moment questions. We didn't mind spur-of-the-moment questions, but it helped if you'd prepared and actually your question came from the passage you had actually studied and thought about. It was very helpful to a number of people that they had a time when they set aside to have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee when it was quiet, when the babies were having a nap, or before they had to go and pick up kids from school, or whenever it was. They put a time on when they would do it every week, and it became part of their routine, which was very important. Polly.
Have you worked at all with women who left school, say, in year 10? My experience is women, the idea of doing homework, is that like or preparation, is a bit foreign to someone, like someone they've not got that discipline, they've never done homework in their life.
Yes, you
Can
may.
you just repeat the question?
What will we do with people who hadn't gone beyond year 10 and weren't used to the idea of preparing, and the whole idea of homework was in their minds? The group I read the Bible with, read Mark with, some of them had never gone, it was different from dealing with doctors. Some of them had never gone beyond year 10. And so we took it fairly slowly, and I sort of slid over the Old Testament passages. The others could come and ask me what that was all about, but I made it as simple as I could for them. I took a group of women on one night a week, and fortnightly, and they were women who couldn't come in the daytime because they worked. And I found something strange happened, that single women came to that because they were sick of being the oldest in a mixed Bible study group, and that really suited them. I never thought that would be one of the things that would happen. And we were a mixed group in our education. And some of them, although they left school at year 10, were actually quite canny. It was surprising. But you would take things fairly slowly, probably slower than I would have taken in the daytime group I had. That was really a very helpful and encouraging group to me. I had no idea that there were people, women who felt uncomfortable in mixed groups and were very happy to have a group only for women at night, which made me rethink about some of the things we did, because we're learning all the time. But I would be careful what I asked, particularly if I asked people questions in the group. Okay, Sandra, what do you think of this? Jenny, what have you got to say? I'd be careful what I asked them, so that would not make them embarrassed, or the group embarrassed. The group would be embarrassed for them. They're lovely people, so they would be embarrassed for them. And I would probably get another hit served from my co-leader, that I shouldn't have done that. But there are studies that are written in a more basic way, and if you wish to do that, you might take things a lot more slowly, but you could actually work out questions you could ask which they could find the answers to in the passage.
Other questions?
Just in terms of training leaders who to perhaps first have a go at writing their own study, what sort of training did you do, or did you generally just sort of get them to just have a go and then they got the feedback from the coordinator?
No, I think, how did we train leaders who'd never led before? I think probably for leading the group, we certainly put them with someone who was an experienced leader, and they got a chance to have a go at leading a study. But you made sure, or I made sure, that it wasn't a difficult study, so that they would get some positive feedback from what they did, and it wasn't too hard for them. I mean, we don't want to do to people and say, I'm never going to lead again because it was so horrible. So you were careful in what you asked them to do. Also, within the group and praying, you were careful who you put people with, so it wasn't too dramatic for them and created hostilities and things. The second part, and training about writing studies, you got people to have a go, but under a very gentle directions and leadership. Yep. Is that fair? Did I do that? Yes.
I think so.
Thanks.
Sounds like learning on the job and modelling
Yes.
as well, but gently, kind of as people were ready.
This is the first time you've ever written a study. We're going to ask you to write something out of Hebrews 9 or something, or Romans 9 to 11, yeah. No.
Did you run something like a Grow Group leaders training with the Women's Bible Study, or that was maybe too much time commitment for them?
We had leaders' meetings, and where certainly the other leaders told me what I should be doing, and the co-leaders came along, and I think they learnt things from the leaders' meetings.
Okay.
Okay.
One or two other questions?
No.
I was going to ask a question just about, you mentioned application and how some of the studies you had used were not great with application questions. Do you have some wisdom? I know it's hard without a specific passage, but any general wisdom on application for Old Testament?
Oh, sometimes I looked at in other prepared studies, looked at the application and thought that it will mean nothing to my group of women. And I would just ignore it and put in one of my own that was relevant to them, because if you have a male mind, do we believe in all that stuff anymore? You just right. But a number of women in the group were soft and feminine, and that would be too hard, or not that it was too hard, it just wasn't applicable to them. And sometimes you could word it so it made it applicable, but it meant you had to change some of the stuff. I'm trying to think of an example. I know I went through and ruled some out in some of the written studies and thought, that's not applicable, or they'll find that too hard, or if I word it this way, it will be more helpful.
It's helpful you also saying you don't have to use every single question that's there in a pre-prepared, whether it's in a booklet or someone else has written it, that you've got to work out what's good for your group, what's going to be helpful for them, what will make sense to them. Yeah.
Yes, and you're under time constraints. So some groups meet and do the study, don't have much interaction and prayer for each other, and then have someone give a talk. Well, I always found we were under so much time constraint that we didn't have anybody give a talk. And the leaders were very competent people.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Helen. If we can give Helen a small clap.
Maybe you can go down to 19 King Street and pick up some of these.
Thanks for serving us so faithfully and inspiring us to read the Old Testament for ourselves, but also teach it to others. I've been reminded of how Bible study groups can offer something different than the sermons, and especially for Old Testament, but also to think about the whole package of what we're doing, even like to complement the Old Testament with what you're studying in the New Testament and vice versa. Love that. Thanks for encouraging us with your inquisitiveness about the Old Testament and the Bible, and also just, you've read the Bible many times, but even from the talks this morning, you're just always reading closely and noticing and having that kind of humble, teachable, inquiring kind of heart and mind, which is great. So thanks for encouraging us and growing us in our passion, but also confidence to teach the Bible. Yeah, we won't necessarily have all the answers, but to open God's word with people and excite people with the God that we meet and how his promises are fulfilled.
Yes, most of the time you can say, I don't know, I'll go and find out. I'll try and find out the answer to that. I don't know it. Nobody minds that.
And thanks also for encouraging us to be creative. I think with just even some visual things, it's a reminder of, especially with New Testament, but also Old Testament narrative that may actually be really, really helpful. The maps I was looking at Genesis 12, and I'm like, I need to know more about where is Haran, where are all those, the Bethel and East, and I'm like, that would be really help. And even just the significance of Abraham being told to go and leave there and where he's going, I think geographically a map would be awesome for that one. So thanks everyone for coming and your questions and input. I'm going to lead in prayer as we enjoy a break. So we've got afternoon tea from 3 to 3:30, and then you'll have your second round of electives. So let me lead in prayer. Our loving Father in heaven, thank you that you're a God who speaks and makes promises, revealing yourself to your people through your life-giving word. Thank you for the gift of the Old Testament and that all of your promises are found yes in our Lord Jesus. Thank you for the work of your Spirit in Helen's life, as well as her wisdom and many years of reading and teaching the Old Testament. May we each grow in our love of your word in the Old Testament and be better equipped to read and teach it at home and in the various churches and communities we find ourselves in. May we grow in confidence to read the Old Testament, as well as have growing opportunities to read the Old Testament with others. Give us creativity and wisdom and insight. And Father, we pray all of these things in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Thanks, everyone.